Hello, everyone. This is the TopSoil podcast. We're doing a live recording here of our initial TopSoil Tech Enterprise customer meeting. Looking here just at gauging what is the farmer take on regenerative ag? What's the farmer take on carbon markets? Just kind of gaining some insight. And luckily for us at Continuum Ag, we've got kind of a resident. I don't know if we call him a skeptic, but I suppose we could call you a skeptic, Brad. So, kind of a resident, farmer that has been involved in the company now for a while and now looking at making some practice changes, going down the regenerative ag path. So we're going to pick Brad's brain here just a little bit and have a quick little discussion on what's the current farmer take when they're approaching these markets and what do we need to be looking for, and especially as folks that are looking at getting more farmers on board, how do we make them actually switch? It's going to be really interesting to see how that can tie in with the new USDA grant programs, where the Commodity Credit Corp is deploying $1 billion towards getting more folks to adopt climate smart practices. So it'll be very interesting to see Brad's perspective here, and we'll dig in, and hopefully everyone garners a couple quick takeaways on it. So a little bit about what we are doing here first. You can go on. So initially, my name is Mitchell Hora. I'm the founder and CEO, and I'm a seventh generation farmer here in Southeast Iowa. Started Continuum Ag in 2015, and now we are a soil health data intelligence company helping farmers to actually navigate these markets and navigate regenerative ag and help them to optimize the data that they're actually collecting. We've been doing a lot of it on our own farm for quite a while too. Currently, Continuum Ag has a footprint of 38 states and 15 countries. And our goal is to help farmers to quantify and improve their soil health and to really focus on that bottom line profitability. That my take is sustainability initiatives don't matter if the farm is not going to be economically sustainable as well. And we've been able to really quantify this. Last fall, our customers on average improved their bottom line profitability by $106.24 an acre. A huge piece of that is with a better understanding of managing soil fertility, utilizing the Haney soil health test, which allows for a more holistic look into your soil health, a more holistic look into the nutrients that are in your soil, especially as you go down this biological journey. Overall, last year, we helped to improve our total customer bottom line by 1.8 million. So super pumped about that total. And really looking forward to continuing to put more dollars in farmers' pockets, because the real goal here and the real mission is if farmers have dollars in their bottom line or more dollars in their pocket, they take that to not only invest in their family farms, but in their rural schools, communities, churches, things like that. That's where the money goes when farmers have it. So really want to drive that and help to revitalize rural communities. So overall, continuing to scale and on a mission to help 1 million farmers profit from improved soil health. So now, we've been doing these topsoil tech webinars for our farmers and for our consultants, and been building community around that for a long time, for more than a year now or so that we've been doing a lot of webinars. But there's a real opportunity to pull in more of our enterprise customers as well, build community around that, and be kind of a conduit, be a catalyst between the farm and the enterprise companies. So we're looking at doing these monthly webinars. We'll continue to share them on our podcast chain as well, potentially on YouTube, just getting the info out there, putting more info on LinkedIn and on other stuff as well. The podcast, the Topsoil podcast, if this is your first episode, we also have episodes out with that feature Rabobank. We got one coming soon, features Bank of America, Cargill, Soil Regen, and lots of really key farmers like Rick Clark and a variety of others. So now in this first episode, let's just dig in and chat with Farmer Brad on why Regen Ag, why Continuum, why carbon, why other cost share programs and stuff, and why is now the right opportunity. To tee things up just a little bit, my family and Brad's family go way back. Our dads were in the AGR fraternity house together at Iowa State back in the early 80s. And Brad was a couple years older than me in the house, so we never aligned there. But Had the opportunity to get reconnected with Brad about a year and a half ago now already, I suppose, a little bit more than that almost. But about a year and a half ago. And Brad's been involved in Continuum and helping us to build out systems and processes and scale the company. But Brad's still involved directly in the farm as well. Brad, thanks for taking the time here today. Really interested in picking your brain a little bit further on some of this stuff. And but welcome aboard. Why don't you tee us off, explain a little bit about your farm and kind of what you guys currently do, and then we'll dig in further on, what are some of those changes that you're making, but what's standard look like, and explain the farm.
Yeah. So happy to be here. And I'd say that it's good to be skeptical, Mitchell. It's good not to just drink the Kool-Aid right away. So definitely, I definitely am a skeptic, and I come at it basically from a very simple perspective of what financially makes sense. And so my story really is grew up in Northeast Iowa on a hog farm. My dad had row crop as well, but primarily a hog operation. Fifth generation on that farm, and actually celebrated our century anniversary, I guess, in 2020. So it got recognized at the Iowa State Fair and all that good stuff. So my career took me off the farm a little bit. I ended up as a commodity analyst in New York, and then in ag finance in Chicago. And I actually currently split my time between Chicago and the home farm. It's about 3.5 hour drive between the two. But I also was a co-founder of a company that basically sold inputs to farmers as well. And I was fortunate enough to sell that company in 2019, basically to pursue farmland. And so the fence line opportunity came up right next to the home farm. So I was able to purchase 240 acres of my own with my wife. And so um, I'm obviously very blessed, but I call it, is it luck of the Irish, like the McDonald last name, or adapting to the times? And so I would like to say that it's a little bit of both, but certainly my approach is you got to make the finances work in order to have that luck. So that's my approach overall.
But overall, the operation, corn, soybeans, but then you guys have hogs as well, but you're
Yeah.
directly not necessarily involved in the hog operation, but your dad and the rest of the family are, correct?
Yeah. So my brother actually just came back and to help run the hog operation. So he's on the day to day with dad. Dad still lives at the farm, but yeah, I'm always back for running the row crop operation as well. So basically, you asked a lot of whys at the beginning here. So why start down the path? Well, for me, it actually took a long path. It was a year worth of exposure working at Continuum Ag before I started implementing these practices on my own farm. So planted my first cover crop last fall in 2021, and really before I was actually able to make that dive, I just needed to make sure that it penciled out. That ultimately is the end all be all. I like to say the top three reasons why I would change any practices: increase profitability, increase profitability, increase profitability. If you check all three of those boxes, that's probably a good indication that a change needs to be made. I'm certainly open-minded to changes, but I need to make sure that it makes financial sense. As a young farmer, just getting into it, not very established, like the old folks, basically, in order for me to have any opportunity to pass on land, I've got to make sure that I take care of the finances first. And so that's really the number one, two, and three things that I care about at this point.
So you're plenty open to opportunity to change and looking at this and penciling it out, but your dad is not necessarily that
Yeah.
trigger happy, I suppose, on being able to change. And even yours, it was over a year before really making kind of the change. Now, it wasn't quite that long on really digging into it. And obviously ag is seasonal and such, but on the farm, for the most part, I mean, you guys have been decreasing tillage and stuff, but still utilizing tillage and never really utilized cover crops. But you're also in a part of the country where there's not really anybody else using no-till or cover crops either.
Yeah, I mean, people are starting to slow a little bit on the tillage piece, but very rarely do you have a no-till operation, and then certainly no cover crops. We just don't have anyone who's and it would be unheard of for anyone planting green into cover crops in my area. And so I attribute a lot of this is just a generational thing. People younger tend to be a little bit more open-minded, and people who are older tend to be, hey, if it's kept me in an operation this long, why change, right? And so I'm not going to argue that mentality. But for me, I'm okay with being a little bit more open-minded, a little bit more innovative, just because I don't have that experience. And so if I'm able to figure out a way that might be a little bit different compared to what my dad thinks, maybe I get a little bit extra change in the pocket, I'm open-minded to that. And so it's more of a generational thing. I don't think that's anything new, certainly, but definitely what my mentality is. And so why Regen? Well, bottom line is it did pencil out. And so doing my own calculations on my own farm, taking what I've learned with working with Continuum, basically just walking through the numbers. Fertilizer, I was at about $300 per acre for my cost. I learned that honing in on just utilizing what fertilizer I actually needed, I could save close to $80 just from that practice change alone. So just reducing the fertilizer, that was a huge cost savings. Obviously, if you go from a tillage system to a no-till, you're saving money on the machinery. So I have that at $9, but you have some expenses as well. And so for me, the cover crop that I put in cost me about $18.50, $18.50. The soil sampling was a little bit more expensive. So to get that really honed in fertilizer understanding, you pay a little bit more, $5.35 extra per acre is what it came out to for me. And then I also purchased what is one of Continuum's premier products, is the Regen Roadmap, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. That came out at $5 per acre as well. So considering the fertilizer and the tillage savings, but then the cost of cover crop, soil sampling, and Regen Roadmap, I'm saving $58.43 is what it came out to. So that's not nothing, as I would say. So it was definitely enough for me to say, you know what, let's go ahead and pull the trigger. And just that alone, it made sense for me to go ahead and go down this path, at least on one of my fields. So I only did it on an 80 for now, but I'm definitely testing the waters just based on the math of the finances.
Yeah. So one of the key things here, the farm has a history of hog manure, and
Yeah.
regular soil sampling is not able to pick up the organic nutrients coming out of that manure, the organic phosphorus, organic nitrogen. A lot of the cost savings is because we're able to quantify that entire pool. And the soil sampling that, Continuum Ag helped you out with, that the key difference there and why it's more expensive is it uses the Haney soil health test, which is what allows us to be able to see more of that holistic management. But so paying an extra $5 an acre compared to what you used to pay for soil sampling, definitely not nothing. And then the agronomic advice through the Regen Roadmap, an extra $5. So it's basically spending a new $10 an acre. But even after that, you're still netting an improved $58 an acre bottom line. So about 5x, almost 6x return to the bottom line right there. That's after those additional expenses.
Yeah, and honestly, I just didn't like the old approach that I used to do when it came to fertilizer. It was just back of the napkin. Well, if it was soybeans, what did it gain for bushel, and then just using that for nitrogen going forward. I didn't like that approach. I wanted to know exactly what was in the soil, and so, and especially with the hog manure, yeah, you can send in the manure samples and try and get an understanding. But I mean, I put it on in the fall, knifed in, and so I don't know what exactly is leached. So these are actually estimates at this point as far as what my savings will be. But I'm actually going to be doing an extra soil sampling this spring just to really hone in and know for sure what's going on, because that at least in today's environment with high fertilizer prices, it just makes sense to do that extra investment to know exactly what is going to be needed. And hopefully, I mean, I put on 5,500 gallon hog manure. So we'll see if I can even get by without even having to put any synthetic fertilizer for N on at all, which in today's environment, that's a huge cost savings for me. And so just honing in, knowing exactly what's going on in the soil, I think it's a no brainer at this point.
Well, a lot of farmers would be utilizing that hog manure in the fall, very, very common practice across Iowa, then typically coming back even with another 100 units of nitrogen, maybe more. In today's prices, you're talking about $1 an acre, or sorry, $1 a pound
Oh,
for
wow.
that nitrogen. So spending an extra couple bucks on a couple of handy tests, because we wouldn't necessarily have to come back and do every single zone again.
Yeah.
We're seeing farmers that do, and we've been doing that on our own farm as well, that we'll sample in the spring and really be able to dial in, especially that in-season nitrogen. So really, really interesting to see that, that's kind of directly part of the thought process and really pencils out, especially in super high fertilizer prices like we have today. And that's also why, you mentioned fertilizer costs on your farm of basically $300 an acre. Well, that's significantly higher than what it has been over the last
Oh,
couple
yeah.
of years, just because of the current cost of fertilizer.
Yep, yep. This is replacement cost. So this is based on current fertilizer prices. And so to me, yeah, there's going to be a lot of guys listening to this that already have everything booked, but it's still the same problem as far as if you're over applying stuff that you're not going to use, it's just wasted money. I don't care if you bought it at 300 pounds of anhydrous or $300 per pound or per ton, sorry, or if you 1400 where it's at right now, it's still wasted money if the plant's not using it. And so why do that? Why not just know exactly what's in your soil and then just apply exactly what's needed? To me, that makes the most sense. So why Continuum Ag? So once you decide to do Regen, then the question is if you were to actually buy Regen or the Continuum Ag products. And for me, it just comes down to it's cheap insurance. We talked about the Regen roadmap was $5 per acre. Well, that's less than one bushel right now when looking at current commodity prices. And Continuum will tell me exactly what I need to do, and they'll give me an actual roadmap per field that I sign up, and then they're going to check in with me every month saying, hey, do you have any questions? Do you have anything that you need to be helped with? Are you good with your cover crop seed? Are you needing help with machinery? All these things it's truly an all-inclusive service to make sure that I'm doing everything that I need to in order to be successful. And really, when I say cheap insurance, it's all to protect my bushels and yield is what it is you hear the horror stories, especially in my area. No one wants to touch a cover crop because they hear the horror stories of losing 20 bushels in yield. And if that happens in the area, that gets around pretty quick, and all of a sudden no one is going to touch this. So for me, Continuum Ag just prevents that situation from happening. And it really is compared to what commodity prices is, it's cheap. It's really cheap insurance for me.
And that 20 bushel is really interesting because in our first year using cover crops, we didn't have this kind of service. Continuum Ag was not down this route. I was still up at school. This wasn't a thing we were doing. And dad put out a bunch of cover crop and we lost 20 bushel the acre, exactly
Yeah.
like you just said. Now, at those prices, it was about $100 an acre loss. Today, it'd be significantly higher. And luckily, we tried at first relatively small scale and was able to learn and do it that way. But we didn't have this backing. We didn't have that insurance to help us to overcome those potential losses. And it's not straight up insurance. It's the peace of mind and the know-how of how to actually make the practice change and do it in a risk adverse manner. So huge opportunity now where we see time and time again, you don't have to lose yield at the beginning when you're adopting these practices. Now you're adding some extra cost for sure. And we're going to dig into here how you're directly offsetting some of those costs. But even just we know that you can avoid those really bad downfalls because there's so many of us that have been through that have stubbed our toe and we've overcome it. And now we can ensure that that farmer's risk is going to be protected. And especially for our enterprise client customers who are putting in major dollars into Regen Ag, we've got to protect that dollar investment. Just throwing money at plant and cover crop or throwing money at reduce tillage or reduce your nitrogen or whatever, throwing money at it is fine, but it doesn't overcome the logistic risk of change, which can way outnumber that financial little bitty carrot that you're tossing out there.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think of it, if you're going to go down the path of regen, you can go at it alone and learn the hard way, or you can go ahead and buy some help. And to me, I don't have enough time and enough seasons to keep messing it up. So and learn the hard way. I'd rather someone just tell me and get me going on the right way right away. So funny you mentioned as far as the carrot. So the next question is why a carbon market? And I think there's two approaches that a lot of farmers can view this as: is either the carrot that gets them moving forward, or it's the cherry on top of this awesome regen Sunday. I know the people who drink the Kool-Aid definitely would say that it's always the cherry. Yep, it's just the cherry on top of awesome regen. But I think for me and for a lot of guys, it is that carrot to at least get them interested in the path, to get them walking and to get them exploring, okay, what does regen actually mean on my own operation? And for me, my experience is that it's both. It was both the carrot for me, because if you hear you can get $35 an acre, okay, again, not nothing. And so it's going to get me interested to at least look at it. But then as you look at it, you start to realize that there's a whole lot more than just this carrot. And then it eventually becomes, well, you know what, I would do this regardless whether there's a carbon market or not. And now the carbon payment becomes that cherry on top. And so for me, I think that there's two ways to look at it, and I think they're both relevant. It just depends on where a farmer is in their experience. If they're open-minded to the regen path with or without carbon, then it's just an added benefit. But for a lot of guys, myself included, it was that catalyst to kind of get things moving in the right direction. And so I'm not going to poo-poo on carbon markets at all. I think that it's a great addition to this space. It really is another way to help farmers get some cash in their pockets from doing these practices. And I'm not going to be hating on that at all. So
The key thing there, though, that these carbon markets today are essentially privatized cost share for the practice change. And you were
sure.
at the prime target where you had the ability to change these practices for the first time. So you were the prime candidate for these
Yep,
programs as well, and able to
absolutely.
get the maximum kind of payments and make the full change. So it was a really good carrot at the beginning because it was pretty enticing dollars and you kind of fit within the box of what they're going after.
Yep.
You checked, all the target parameters as far as what they're looking for.
Right.
And we're able to jump in and utilize that as a stackable monetary outcome of going down this path.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And again, for the guys that have already been going down the path, they're going to look at carbon markets and say, what's in it for me? Because they don't get paid by it. But since they're already down the path, I guess then there's really no additional incentive for them to go down the path, I guess. So needed. So um, really, I guess, yeah, when you add in the other payments now, so basically going back to the economics of it, I signed up for a state cost share and then also a carbon program that added another $70 into this. And so, yeah, it really did become that huge insurance for me to go ahead and pull the trigger. And so now the math works out that when you add that $70 into it, I'm close to $130 a head. Well, that comes out to about 23 bushels of corn that I have a wiggle room now to get back to break even. So I could lose 23 bushels with this additional payment, how the math works out, all costs included, that now I have that ability to implement. And really hiring Continuum Ag, as long as I keep those bushels somewhat close to my normal, now I'm really ahead. It really just makes a lot of sense. I would hope that by just putting a cover crop and no-till system, I can manage it so I'm not losing 23 bushels per acre. And as long as I can do that, I'm going to be coming out ahead by just going through this. So
I think it's a really key way to look at it, that, yeah, you've got some additional cost, you've got some direct cost savings because of the new data that you gathered with the Haney test. And
yeah,
then you got the cost share programs, of course, that usually people kind of go after the cost share program first, maybe the carbon program first. The soil data doesn't come in till later, which for you, it was kind of one of the earlier things. that we were able to look at, and it kind of all worked in
Yep.
tandem, of course, but
Yeah.
really interesting to see then, yeah, the, potential for $128 a head if yield doesn't change. And that would be definitely the goal. When I'm approaching a farm, I say at the beginning, we're just going to keep the same yield. We're going to try to decrease some of our inputs. We're going to utilize some of the cost share to overcome some of our new expenses, and we're going to maintain yield. And what's really interesting as you put this all together is that you went straight to what I call farmer math, which
Yeah.
is how many bushels does this program cost me, and how many bushels do I have of wiggle room before I'm going backwards. And in that ended up being 23 bushels at a fairly conservative price of $5.50 a bushel. That obviously you can market it for even better than that probably right now too, but it's the right number to go off of. Even call it $5, $5.50. That would definitely be where farmer math goes to right now. But really interesting as I work with different companies and stuff and explain to them farmer math, that it's all the total cost or the opportunity divided by bushels,
Yep.
and the cost per bushel. So that's awesome.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's the right approach as well. I just need to know, okay, what's actually happening in my field, what's my downside risk, and to be able to understand the math behind it, I think makes a lot of sense. And so what are my concerns by going down this path is, number one is yield loss. And for me, that's the only thing that I'm concerned about. I want to make sure that I'm not going to lose more than $23 or 23 bushels per acre. And so to me, that is the number one thing. But talking with a whole bunch of farmers going through this process as well, there is perception fear. There's just doing something weird in the neighborhood. People talk. Doing something unfamiliar, just not used to doing this, and people don't like to change. If things have been working for generation after generation after generation, like I said before, I'm not going to blame them for sticking to the process that works. And so doing something unfamiliar, there is that risk there that they mess it up and it ends up hurting them. I threw in as far as planting green as well. Mostly this is a very specific story. When I try to get my dad to buy into all of this, he looks at this magnificent picture of a planter in cover crop, and something like this gives him severe anxiety, right? So a farmer typically likes to see that nice black canvas, smooth soil bed, to be able, and that's the perception forever, that's the best way to grow a crop and to plant into what most farmers would call weeds is just it's anxiety driven. So it really is a different mindset when doing some of these practices that a lot of farmers fear. I don't necessarily fear that as much. Like I'm probably a little bit more open-minded as far as I don't care about the perception or doing something unfamiliar. I'm all about doing change as long as it makes sense financially. But the only way that it makes sense financially is that I don't lose yield. And so that was the number one thing. So that for sure is the number one thing that I'm concerned with. And we'll see what happens this year. So we'll check in a year later and see how
Yeah,
it goes.
you don't care about the perception. All the farmers around you are gonna say, "Oh, Brad spent too much time in Chicago." Geez,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So they're gonna blame that anyway. But yeah, I mean, I look at it now. I always, a lot of times growing up, we'd have, maybe no till or kind of a strip till type farm, but we had a lot of farms that were tilled up and stuff too. And I was like, oh, that just looked beautiful, and I was in the same boat, that's kind of how it had looked. And now I look at a picture like this, or look at farms that are planting green, where we got that living green plant all the time, and that to me looks way better. And that's now my perception of what it should look like, and what I know that it really can look like. Not only because, and I don't care about it from the water side or carbon side or whatever. I just know that by doing that and planting green into that farmer can be making more money and protecting their long term, and it can really be the right business decision if they know how to overcome some of the risks. So
That's
hopefully more, you can be the first one, and everyone else will come along and follow in your wake here, Brad.
Yeah. Once I start posting that I got 300 bushel of the acre and get that around the neighborhood, I'm sure
Freaking
that
everyone
everyone's
in.
going to be green next year. So
That's right. That's right.
So, what does the future look like for me? Really, I see this as two paths. I can stay traditional and just looking at the math, straight up math, I can continue to lose out on profitability every year, or I can adapt and make sure that I'm not the last generation on the McDonald farm. And so, it's at least worth trying. It's worth at least seeing whether or not the math actually does work out at the end of the year. I'll find out. And so, um, to me, it's a no-brainer which path to choose, at least to start down.
Well, what's interesting is you're going at it with just an 80 out of your own 240 acres, a
Yeah,
percentage of your acreage, and a relatively small percentage of the entire operation. To
yeah,
start
yeah.
there, to
I
learn.
wasn't able to convince Dad to get on board yet, but
No,
yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there.
we're working on it. We're working on it. He'll come along.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes to the last point as far as, okay, how do we get more farmers to think like this? And to me, it comes down to better education and marketing, highlighting the economics of it. Because I think that too many people who are drinking the Kool-Aid, the message is that we can do a lot to save the world, and that's a great message. But to really get farmers to change their practices, you have to talk to them about their bottom line, and that's really the number one thing. I like to say you can't pass land on if the bank takes it, and every farmer has felt that, and that's something that they're going to be able to talk about. And if you're able to actually put those numbers, their own economics, and actually show them what does that look like over time by implementing regen practices. We have a great tool at Continuum that we just developed and launched called Regen Returns that does just that, where farmer can put in their own numbers and then put in and all of it for free, and then go ahead and say which practices they're willing to do. So we call our soil sampling right way. So if you get that soil sampling to hone in on the fertilizer costs, that's one way to save money. And then also tillage and cover crop practices that actually show what does that profitability look like on someone's operation through time. I think that's the best way to talk to farmers. I really do. I think that if you can show we can take you from making this amount of money and then go through a regen process, and after year 5 get 20, 30, 40% higher returns, that's going to hit. I think that's the number one thing that's going to hit for them. So that's the message that I want to be honing in on for these guys.
Yeah, that's been again the really crucial thing of documenting and showing what does it actually mean directly to your bottom line, but also what is that risk, and that's what we show. And then this graph that Brad's showing, um, in year 1 and maybe even year 2, there's some major risk if you screw things up that you can really lose out. And like I shared on our farm, it was $100 an acre loss.
Yeah.
On other farms, you can have a total crop loss where you go and tear it up if you're not patient and let it do its thing. But you can really lose a lot of money if you're not going about this in the right way. Chasing the carrot can lead you down a bad path if you don't have the right advice, the right help. But I really like having the graph and having the data like this to be able to quantify what is that risk, so I can communicate with my banker. I can go after what kind of cost share programs are maybe out there that can help me. What am I facing here? And then I can figure out how big of a percentage of my farm should I take this risk on, knowing that the faster I overcome that risk, the faster I go down this path, the quicker I can get to that improved profitability and improved upside. What's really interesting on everything you've shared, though, is that you're directly able to overcome any type of negative financial downfall in year 1 and be money ahead right away,
Right.
which is typically not what we hear. We typically hear that it takes 10 years to improve soil health, or that, that this is big, you're going to lose money or you're going to lose yield at the beginning. I just really don't think that's the case. So as companies are listening into this and looking at getting more farmers to change, that we got to show them, hey, we can overcome that risk. It's not necessarily universal that you're going to lose yield. You're not going to, you're not going to have these negatives if you're getting the right help. And that's why I really worry that there's lots of cost share dollars out there. There's lots of carrots out there. There's lots of new carbon programs. But the key is, how do you help that grower to actually understand the principles of soil health, to actually understand what is the goal, and to put together the very specific holistic management plan of the step-by-step on how to change, how to be risk adverse in doing it, and measure that improved profitability every step along the way. That's been massive for us as we help all our farmers across the country adopt more of these regenerative systems.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this chart, for anyone who can see it, takes into account yield loss and then also does not include any of the cost share programs. And so when comparing the numbers before, this is going to look a little bit different. And this is for my whole operation, including my dad. So that's where the numbers are. But at the end of the day, yeah, just the cost shares and the carbon programs overcomes what's that estimated risk in year one. And to me, again, speaking to the economics of it, it just becomes a no-brainer to start down the path. And so there's really two questions. Are you going to do regen or not? And then if you say, yes, you are, then the next question is, are you going to do it with Continuum or not? And to me, if you're going to go down the regen path, you better make sure you get the help needed and the resources you need in order to protect yourself on the yield piece. Because that's the number one way that you take it from a great situation to a bad is if you have those yield disasters. And you might as well go ahead and get the help right now to be able to cover that. So yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, Mitchell. So
I like it. No, it's been fun, and I think really good insight. I hope people gather a lot from this. I'm sure we'll continue to document Brad's story and stuff on our website and put together our case studies and stuff. We got case studies on a variety of other farms at Continuum.ag, and happy to have follow-up conversations and keep this going. But Brad, it's been fun to hang out and dig into this a little bit more. Looking forward to more of these webinars, more podcast material, and continue to share these stories. Because like I said, it's about educating. That's how we're going to get more folks on, educating first, and then bringing right behind that the digital tools that are needed and the support that's needed if you are going to take the plunge and go down the path. So good stuff. And yeah, continuing to press ahead.